Hello and welcome to the After Sermon podcast, where we pick up all the bits from the cutting room floor. And on this Christmas special, we are looking at the sermon, Don't Leave God Until Tomorrow. Mr. Godfrey, do you know what time it is? Do you know what the season is around about December?
Well, here in Australia, the season is summer.
As far as festive seasons go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What season would it be?
It's Christmas season.
I think you're referring to Christmas there.
I think you're onto it, Mr. Watson. But the real question is, have you bought your Christmas presents yet?
You know what? I actually have not. At least not most of them. There are a couple.
Are you telling me
that I picked up this last week?
You've procrastinated a bit, have you?
Well, procrastination is such a strong word.
Well, look. Do you know what your plans are for Christmas? What are you going to be doing on December 25th?
I am going to be celebrating Christmas, of course.
Specifically?
You know, we haven't got that far yet.
So you're procrastinating it?
You could say that, yes.
Look, in case you haven't realised, ladies and gentlemen at home, today's sermon that we're going to be looking at is about procrastinating. Once again, I'm Christopher, and ladies and gentlemen, you are in for a treat, because not only do we have Mr. Michael Godfrey with us, we also have special guest, Mr. Jaya Watson. Guys, please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Jai. I'm probably your resident visitor. Just filling in this session.
And I'm Michael Godfrey. You probably will remember me from the previous podcast, and you've also heard a bit from me already.
Awesome. And in case you haven't put it together just yet, this is our Christmas special episode, and we're feeling a little bit festive today.
Definitely.
Christmas is in the air.
Well, let's get into the recap. Before we do, if you haven't watched Don't Leave It Until Tomorrow, Don't Leave God Until Tomorrow, sorry.
He's pretty important. You might want to put him in there.
Yeah, don't forget that. The link will be just below. And there's probably going to be some spoilers throughout this podcast. With that out of the way, let's get into our quick recap.
Mr. Godfrey, give us a quick recap about what this sermon was all about.
Okay, so the sermon, Don't Leave God Until Tomorrow. If you haven't already heard it, I recommend, first of all, that you do go and listen to it, because I think it's a pretty important topic, and I think it's something that isn't normally addressed, especially in a sermon.
It's true.
Very, very relevant.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so the beginning of the sermon, we talked about what procrastination is. I actually started with a story that kind of...
An anecdotal, personal
story. It's written in the spirit of what I have struggled with in the past, which is procrastinating my university assignments. Of course, it was over-exaggerated a lot, and that was for a bit of comedic effect, and also to really hammer home the point. So we started with a story. We talked about what procrastination is. We talked about the top 5 things people procrastinate. We talked about some excuses they use to justify what they're doing. And then we looked at procrastination in a spiritual context. That's what the meat of the sermon was, looking about procrastinating or delaying, putting off our spiritual growth, our relationship with God, really. And then what we did was we went and we looked at what the Bible has to say about it. We had a look at 4 or 5 different passages. We had a look at a quote as well. And then we summed the whole thing up by looking at some ways that we can overcome procrastination, and particularly and specifically overcoming spiritual procrastination in our own lives. So that's pretty much what the sermon was about.
Awesome. And once again, guys, if you haven't heard that before and you want to listen to that sermon, or if you'd like to share it with someone else, the link to that sermon will be in the description below.
Yes. All right. So let's get into your impressions first of all. So what did you two think of the sermon? What did you like? And do you have any constructive criticism you can give?
We haven't had a constructive criticism segment before. Are you asking for it?
If you're interested in providing one, I'd be happy to take that.
Look, I really liked it. I liked how you started with the story, and also liked all the lists that you gave, such as the top 5 things people procrastinate and the top 3 procrastination excuses, because it made it very relatable.
Thanks, that's what I was going for.
I don't think there's anyone who hasn't felt like that, who hasn't procrastinated doing work or exercising or cleaning. I'm pretty sure every person's done that, and we all often have the exact same sort of justifications in our mind, like, oh, I've got time to do it, or, you know, it'll come around later, there's no rush, these other excuses, or I don't know how to do it. So I found it good that you made it relatable to begin with. But then I liked how you also went down to a deeper level, because I think you could even argue you could have just left it at a purely physical level and brought out some sort of, you know, biblical aspect from that, which is what a lot of the verses talk about that you provided. But you actually went deeper by looking at it in a spiritual aspect and looking at how procrastinating has a negative effect on our spiritual life if we're denying those spiritual priorities in our life. So I found it really good, and it was challenging because it's something that everyone deals with and experiences. So it was definitely a really good sermon.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I tried to keep it relatable. It's something obviously that I've had a bit of experience with in my own life, and I'll talk about that a bit more in the drawing board segment. Jai, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, like Chris, I found it very, very relatable as a uni student.
Great.
You would understand that those assignments come around, and there seems like there's always tomorrow to do them.
Yeah.
I just found it really relatable, and the practical application of the effect on your spiritual life as well. I remember in my early Christian experience getting to know God, and that was one of the things that I understood about putting it off, and
definitely.
Yeah, it's true that it was very relatable, and especially with stuff like uni or school and those assignments, you always have that mentality, I got time, and then the time comes and you go, whoops.
Well, that's great, yeah.
Where'd
like
all
I
that
said,
go?
that's exactly what I was going for. I didn't want the congregation to be listening, or for anyone at home to be listening and saying, what does this have to do with me? How does this relate to me?
Yeah.
I wanted them to look at it and say, yeah, that's me. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand what he's saying. I understand what God's saying. You know, so yeah, I hope it all made sense, and I hope that you got something out of it, everyone who listened to it.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Watson?
I would. The last point is I just really like the options for overcoming the things that you suggested for people who are suffering with procrastination to really move past that and to just do it.
That's right.
Just do it.
That's right. Well,
I'm pretty sure Shia LaBeouf will have to make an appearance in this episode
special cameo. That's right,
somewhere in the editing. He'll pop up. He'll pop up.
Yeah, I couldn't just leave it at this is the point. We had to go further, and we had to summarize it with this is what you can do about it. This is the practical element.
Yeah. All right, that's awesome. Well, let's keep the ball rolling by going to our segment, the drawing board. Not Michael, Mr. Watson. What is the drawing board?
The drawing board is where we discuss the sources, inspiration, and goals of the sermon in order to better understand the sermon in question.
Awesome, and I think we've already sort of covered the goals of the sermon.
We have, that's right.
But what were your sources and inspirations as you were researching this?
Okay, well, this is something I've been thinking about for quite some time. I've had a lot of thoughts about it.
You sort of the way you phrase it's like, I've been thinking about it, I've just never done anything about it for quite a while.
You could even say that I've been delaying
sermon on procrastination.
Yeah, that's right.
That I procrastinate.
Yeah, which is some type of irony, but so the inspiration, well, I think one big thing, it's actually to do with you, Jai. We're in the car on a trip. We were talking about our spiritual lives, relationship with God. And this thing came up, this idea that it's very, very easy for us to have something come up and for us to say, oh, God, I value our relationship. I think it's really important, but I just don't have time right now. Using that excuse, or using one of the other excuses, like I've got time. I'm going to have time later. I don't need to start right now. Or really, I just don't know where to start. And Jai had the idea. He had several ideas. One of his really good ideas was just to say, well, you can become immersed in spiritual things all throughout the day. You can get verses and you can stick them up and you can look at them and you can do all of these different things that remind you of God and that you keep you connected to God and keep you thinking about God throughout the day. You don't need to say your devotion at the beginning of the day or whenever you do it. You don't need to say that reading the Bible or praying, you don't need to say they're the only things that you can do to maintain the relationship with God. And that kind of got me thinking. And then I also was relating that back to my own procrastination in other areas, which is kind of, I guess, related to my personality type. But I know this is something that a lot of people do. They have the habit of delaying things or putting things off. And I thought this would be a really, really good idea for a sermon because, like I said before, it's not something that's talked about a lot. It's not something that people think about. Especially, it's especially not something that people apply to spiritual life, spiritual growth.
Or at least they don't think of it in this same
in the same
frame.
context. That's right. Because a lot of people say, especially people at university, but everywhere, a lot of people say, you really shouldn't put that off. You really should start doing it. Procrastination's bad, and these are the reasons why. But you don't get many people coming up and saying, how's your spiritual life going? How's your relationship with God going? And you don't get, and there's even fewer people that come up and say to you, are you putting it off? Are you delaying it? So you don't get convicted as much. You don't feel that you're doing anything wrong. And I wanted to bring out that it's really important because it does hold negative implications in the short term and especially the long term if you do continue to put it off. Like I said in the sermon, it's habitual. It's not, you might miss one or 2 days. It's not going to hurt you as much. But if it is something that becomes a habit, if it's something that you do constantly, again and again, consistently, then you're going to recognize the changes.
You're going to see those differences in your spiritual life. For sure.
And I wanted to bring that out, and that's kind of what inspired me to.
Awesome. And linking back to the overall goal, I think you did a good job because it really is a sermon that asks you to self-evaluate your spiritual life. Where are the discrepancies and where can you improve in order to better that spiritual life? So I really think you nailed it, Mr. Godfrey.
Thanks. It really tries to bring out this whole idea of none of us are perfect, and we all need to, that's right, self-evaluate ourselves, look at ourselves and say, this might not be something that I'm doing right now even, but is it something I've done in the past, and is it something that I might be inclined to do in the future, and if so, what can I do about it, and how can I prevent it from happening?
For sure. Awesome. All right, well, before we get into what is normally our main, this week, Christmas meat of the podcast, the cutting room floor, Mr. Godfrey, there actually wasn't a great deal of which you cut out, but we decided that there was a lot that you mentioned that you weren't able to discuss
in depth
that you'd already addressed in the sermon, but not to quite the level. So I suppose you can consider this a bonus round of the cutting room floor, or just the cutting room floor.
That's right.
Before the cutting room floor.
Yeah, so it's a pre-bonus round.
It's a pre-bonus round, or it is the cutting room floor. But for those who might not know, quickly, Jai, what is the cutting room floor?
The cutting room floor is a segment where we discuss the parts of the sermon that didn't make it into the final product, and we discuss them.
Awesome. Pretty simple.
Very.
So, Godfrey, you started off with the top 5 things people procrastinate.
This was very interesting. I found this in a couple of places, and I thought, this is something I want to include.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. So, for those of you who haven't listened to the sermon, or maybe you have, and it kind of...
Just a recap.
Yeah, just to recap. The top 5 things, we got number 5, which is organising our workspaces. It's something that a lot of people put off. They've got these messy desks or rooms, places where they work, and they just can't be bothered to get them organised.
Yeah.
It's probably, you're probably more inclined to put that off if you don't have a problem with a messy workspace. I guess if you're...
Depends on your personality.
Definitely. I guess if you're that personality that cares more about having everything clean and tidy and orderly, you're not going to be inclined to put that off as much. Yep. Number 4, assignments. We said assignments in school assignments, university assignments. We also said work assignments. What I meant by that, I didn't really talk about that very much. What I meant by work assignments was really just work assignments.
Yeah.
It's projects that you might be given at work or things that you just need to get done. And then number 3 is correspondence. I was talking about work and then also personal correspondence. It's things like keeping up your relationships, really, with other people. So this isn't necessarily with God, it's just with people in general. It's saying, I guess, delaying emailing or texting them or calling them, saying, I'll do it later. Yeah. It doesn't have to happen right now. But if you do that, there's a couple of things that happen. This is what I found. One of the things is people think that you don't care, and rightfully so. if
you're not responding.
If you look at a text and the text says "seen" and then there's no response, you think, come on, that's just unfair. And then
I've had a couple of messages from you like that.
No, that's not me. That's not me at all.
Michael was an active one.
No.
There you go.
And then the other thing it does is if you put it off for too long, it just piles up so high, and then you get to a point where you say, I really need to reply to everything, and it takes ages.
Yeah.
And then you're wishing that you'd just done it all as it came up, wishing that you hadn't put it off. All right, number 2, cleaning. Everyone hates cleaning.
Yeah,
well, I guess not everyone hates cleaning. I think a lot of people cleaning. It's not fun. I think that's the problem.
Except around exams or
assignments. Where are those notes?
Cleaning is only something that people do willingly if they are trying to put off something
it's
else.
Absolutely essential.
Essential. Yeah, that's right. And then the top one is exercising. I think that's pretty funny.
That doesn't surprise me.
No, not at all. Me neither.
Well, I'll tell you what. If I'm completely honest, I've done all 5 of those at one point.
As have I.
It's pretty ridiculous how, not necessarily that we put them off, but the fact that everyone has them in common. I'm pretty sure most people would be able to say, I've done at least 3 of those, probably.
That's right.
Yeah, I could certainly say that 3 on a possibly regular
basis.
Yeah.
I'm pretty useless at them. But that was good to just sort of establish some reliability. And then we looked at, again, the top 3 procrastination excuses, which
that's right.
Quickly were, number 1, I just don't know where to start.
I don't know where to start.
How do I start?
How do I do it? That's right.
Number 2, I don't need to start right now.
Got all the time in the world.
And number 3,
I
don't have enough time.
Yeah, it's the opposite. It's I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
There's too much on my plate right now. I just can't fit it in.
Yeah. And then we just looked at a few of the Bible verses. We won't go into great depth with them here because they're addressed pretty well in the sermon by you, Godfrey.
So go and check it out.
Yep. But for a quick reference, if you want to find those, the ones that were looked at were Proverbs 24, verses 30 through 34.
That's right.
Proverbs 6, 4 through 11. And 2 Corinthians 5:14 and 1 Corinthians 10:31.
And if you listen to the sermon, for those verses in Corinthians, there's a slight twist on them. I recommend you actually go back and... In fact, we could even do it now.
Yeah, I think we can quickly just cover the concept.
That's right.
Very quickly, the main gist of it.
So, what I'd like to do is, if we could read out the verses as they stand in the Bible. So, let's start with 2 Corinthians 5:14. What we did in this... what I did in the sermon was... I got this idea from a guy named Pastor Steve Cable. What he did was... he takes this idea of life on Earth, and he kind of changes it a little bit. He doesn't change it, but he just says... Instead of talking about life on Earth, he applies it to people's time on Earth and how they use their time. And so we'll have a look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 14. Let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at the vanilla passage first. That's right. Have you got that one?
2 Corinthians 5 verse
14
says, "For the love of Christ constraineth us, because we thus judged, that if one die for all, then we're all dead."
We'll let this old guy in with this King James. We'll let the old fart in.
That's right. No, that's good. Have you finished? Was that the whole thing? Okay. Oh yeah, there it is. Good. And then here I've got the abridged version, which basically says, "The love of Christ controls us, having concluded this: one died for all, therefore all died. He died for all, so Jesus died, so that we who have time on this earth might no longer use our time for ourselves, but for Jesus Christ, who died and rose again on our behalf." So it's pretty self-explanatory. That's what it's saying. It's saying Jesus deserves our time. He deserves for us not to put him off, not to put off our relationship with him, because honestly, he didn't put off the plan of salvation.
Yeah.
He was willing and he went through with it. And when it got to that point where he was sweating blood in the Garden of Gethsemane, he had lots of doubts about it. But he didn't let that sway him. He went through with it, and obviously the timing was more up to the Romans than it was up to him.
Yeah.
But he was willing to go through with that, and I don't think that he deserves for us to put off the time we spend with him.
Yeah.
And then the second one here is 1 Corinthians 10:31, and you probably know the vanilla passage. This abridged.
I've got it quick if you want it.
I'll go ahead.
Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God.
And this one says, whether you eat or drink or however you spend your time, use all of your time for the glory of God. Again, pretty self-explanatory there.
I found it pretty powerful the way that the guy phrased it.
Yeah,
however you spend your time, use all of your time for the glory of God.
That's right. Yeah.
That's it's a really cool way of thinking of it in a way that we don't often think of.
I agree.
Awesome. And then finally, you gave us some ways to overcome procrastination. We'll quickly list them and then we'll talk a bit more in depth about them. Number 1 was to make a routine and stick to it. Oh, let's expand on that now if you guys have anything else to add. So yeah, making a routine and sticking to it.
Yeah, I in relation to exercise, I know that if you want to get to the gym and 3 days a week, sometimes it can be a little bit hard. But if you make a routine in steps, like setting goals, if you just commit to going one day a week and just get there for a couple of weeks or whatever, and then bump that up to 2 or 3 days a week, and if you just once you get there, you may as well exercise pretty hard.
Of course, if you've made the effort to get there.
Exactly, and so by doing this little step by step, you can achieve those goals that you wanted to, and sticking to a routine can help you with that. And I know if you plan an assignment, that's another
that's right,
another good one.
A little bit at a time, and then you just work up to bigger things.
And so I suppose the end goal is to create a routine to the point where it becomes habitual.
Yes.
You don't have to think of it as a routine anymore. You're just doing it.
It reminds me of that joke. I missed the gym today. That's 10 years in a row now. Yes, that's not what you want. You want to get into the routine. You want to do it in baby steps, one day at a time, then work it up. Like Jai said, I think it's a great idea to do it like that.
If you want the gains, you got to go to the gym. If you want them spiritual gains,
you got to go to the spiritual gym, which is the
Word of God.
I think some of that statistics that you were looking for was it takes 30 days to create a new habit. So
right, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, I didn't include that.
There we go. Awesome. Tip number 2 for overcoming procrastination is modify your environment and make sure it's inclusive to spiritual growth.
What do you mean by that? Can you just expand on that?
Oh, okay. So this is what I was talking about. I don't know if I expanded upon it well enough in the sermon. I kind of skipped over this point. The reason I skipped over them a little bit was, or just kind of summed them up briefly, was because we were running out of time. This is what I was talking about before when I said that I was sticking up the post-it notes around the room and they had Bible verses on them, and that's one way that you can modify your environment to make it inclusive to spiritual growth. It's just little things that you can do throughout the day so that you're not saying, I missed my devotion, that's it, I've got nothing else.
So for people who are, get up at 4 or 5 in the morning or 6 or whatever, and say they don't have enough time before they go to work.
That's right.
What you're saying is that you can modify your environment by putting things around or taking...
there are other things you can do.
Yeah, by taking Bible verses in your pocket or something
Definitely.
like that. You can, where there's a will, there's a way to spend some time with God. And, perhaps in the afternoons, you've got more time. And that might be where you really connect with God.
That's
right.
Listening to something on the way to work.
That's what I said a little bit on... because people have a lot of time on the way to work and back, and it's just wasted time. You can do something with that time.
Yeah, and let's face it, pretty much technology makes things 10 times easier.
It does,
Of all the generations, we probably have the least warranted excuses as far as I don't have enough time, because as you might argue that we're busier, but we also have a lot of stuff to help us cope with all that busyness.
It's how you use it, though, because technology can also be used to waste time.
This is true.
Like procrastinate? YouTube's a tough one.
It's a big one, that's right. YouTube. But not if you're listening to the After Sermon podcast.
Hey, nice plug.
Okay, number 3, which is making God our top priority. I talked about this a bit more in the sermon. This was one of the main points. I think it's important. I think making God our top priority is really, really important, because if he isn't our top priority, we're more likely to delay that and, put off that relationship.
Yeah, for sure. Now, so number 4, Godfrey.
Yes, be immersed in spiritual things. This is kind of actually similar to point number 2. I suppose repeated the same one. This one was more. The other one was looking at your environment. We actually got them backwards. This one was what we were talking about before. The other one, modify your environment. I was looking at doing things like if you're going to have a devotion, which I recommend, having your devotion in the morning earlier on behind a closed door in the bedroom with maybe with the window closed, instead of having it in the living room where everybody's walking around at 8:30 in the morning and the cars are driving past outside and it's just distracting. That idea of all of these things that you can do to make it easier for you to concentrate, and also to make it more enjoyable, so that you'll want to do it, so that you won't be putting it off.
Yeah. Or
I have a personal thing that I do in my worship time. If the house is a little bit too noisy, but I usually put earplugs in and sit in the lounge room.
Nice.
And it just quietens down everything else. And
that's great. That's really good.
A time where I can just really connect and read and pray. So.
And I think if you're going by tip number 3, making God your priority, and similar to what you were saying before, Watson, where there's a will, there's a way. If your priority is to have meaningful devotion and time with God in the morning or in the afternoon or at night time, you'll find a way to make it work. You'll modify your environment, and you'll immerse yourself in spiritual things as well, whether it's even in devotions or throughout the day. You'll make a way.
And this is one of the things that's so awesome about God. He encourages us to pray for these things, to pray for help with these things. And right. It's just an awesome God that we serve.
I'll tell you what, there's some people who've got the right idea about making things a priority and where there's a will, there's a way, are Muslims.
Yes. 5
times a day they will pray, even if it's late at night or early in the morning, and they'll whenever that time of day comes, the prayer mat comes out and they will do their mandatory prayers wherever they are.
It's a real commitment.
It's a real commitment. It's a real reverence. I mean, we'd obviously not agree with everything that they teach, but as far as respecting the reverence that they have for God the commitment that they have to their faith, it really is commendable. And I think you can learn something from anyone. And I think that's one group of people who shares the same idea. Although a better example of that, I would say, would be Jesus. Jesus would early in the morning, before his disciples were even awake, would go to wherever he could, on a mountaintop or just in a garden, and he'd find that time with God. He made that his priority during the day, and so his devotions came first before he did anything else. And so really, ideally, he's the perfect model that we should be trying to mimic.
And by that time in the morning with God, it was strengthening him and filling him with the Holy Spirit, so that when the temptation or the ministry opportunities came, that he was able to have victory over sin and proclaim with power.
Yeah, for sure.
And listeners, if you have heard the previous After Sermon podcast with Jesse Marks in his sermon, we talked about this a little bit, about Jesus and what he did. Jesus was not a procrastinator. Jesus did things immediately, because he knew that putting things off, delaying things, has negative consequences, or can have negative consequences. That's right.
That's true.
So I recommend that you listen to what we said last week as well.
Awesome. And the very last tip for overcoming procrastination is to persevere.
Excellent.
Could you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So perseverance is really important. We can find it very, very easy to fall down and not get back up on the horse again.
Yeah.
We can get to the end of a day and we could have put things off all day and really had nothing done.
Yeah, and again, if you listen to our last episode, we talked a lot about the fact that as far as going outside of our comfort zones go, there is a potential for failure, and that's why a lot of people don't want to go outside. There's a risk that comes we're doing something we're uncomfortable with.
That's right.
But the big thing that we talked about was, it's not so much if you fail, it's more how can you get back up from that.
That's right.
And as far as being spiritually concerned, the only way we come back up is in the same way as Peter. We cry out to God.
And we ask him for help.
And as it says, Jesus immediately took Peter's hand. Jesus is there just waiting for us. If we get stuck in a rut or we've had a bad day, we just need to ask. And by not doing that, we are procrastinating.
That's right.
Procrastinating our spiritual growth.
Definitely.
It's a double procrastination. So I think that's a really important one for us to pay attention to.
I agree, because there's nothing worse than getting to the end of a day and looking back and saying, I haven't got anything done. It's just been discouraging.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for us, if that happens, to... it's very easy for us when that happens to say, I'm not going to give it a go again tomorrow. Yeah, I think it's so easy to become discouraged. We can come to the end of the day and have a look back on everything that's happened, and we can have an unproductive day and have nothing done, and we can look back and we can get really discouraged. And I think it's really important for us to persevere. I think it's really easy for us to look back on a day and when we've been unproductive and become really discouraged, have a look at everything that we haven't been able to do, and it's easy for us to get into this rut, into this habit of continuing that on throughout the rest of the week, and saying, oh, it really doesn't matter anymore, and putting things off and just becoming almost lazy. And I think it's really important for us to persevere and to not have that bad mentality, but to have a good mentality and to be able to say, I'm going to change it, I'm going to get back on the horse, and I'm going to do something different this time.
Awesome. All right, well, that concludes our sort of discussion, I suppose, of the main sermon that you presented. But there were a few things that you weren't able to put in, some of what we would call the main meat of the podcast in our cutting room floor.
That's right.
So what were some of the things you didn't get to talk about in your sermon?
Yeah, well, like you said, there wasn't much that I needed to take out or that I decided to take out. I used a lot of the stuff that I had. There were a couple of things that, for time constraints or other reasons, I didn't take out. The first one was the parable of the 10 virgins. If you're not familiar with it, it's in the book of Matthew. And I'll just paraphrase it really quickly for you. You've got 5 wise virgins and 5 foolish virgins. And it's talking about how the wise virgins, they had their oil ready, and they were ready for the bridegroom to return, who is, of course, the Son of God, to return them. And then the foolish virgins, they slept and they slumbered, or really all of them slept and slumbered, but the foolish virgins didn't prepare. And what I was going to say was, I was going to talk about the importance of being ready, of not slumbering and sleeping, because obviously this parable is a really good example of the eternal consequences, there's negative implications that you have if you're a procrastinator. One of the main reasons I chose to cut it out, aside from the time constraints, was this idea that all of the virgins slumbered and slept, so it didn't really hammer the point home very well. It wasn't really relevant to this, but I think it's really, really good in maybe another sermon, or maybe a kind of a side point, but it wasn't relevant enough and it wasn't specific enough to include in the sermon, so I decided to take it out.
I still think you can draw something out of it, as you were saying, though, that they still weren't prepared. They'd put off that preparation by getting the oil. The wise virgins had bought their oil beforehand and they'd bought extra. The other ones were unprepared. So I still think there is still some validity there, but I can also see how it could sort of interrupt the flow, having to explain it a bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one is in the book of Acts, chapter 26. I'm going to read this one, 26 verse 28. This one here is the story of Agrippa, and it says here in 28, "Then Agrippa said to Paul, 'You almost persuade me to become a Christian.'" And what it's saying is, I guess, Agrippa is he's delaying his conversion experience. He's saying, I'm almost there, but I'm not quite there. And again, this one was taken out because it wasn't particularly relevant, it wasn't explicit enough or specific enough. But I think that it does have relevance a little bit, just not as much, and didn't quite make the cut.
I think it sort of exemplifies one of the reasons that people do procrastinate.
Yes.
It's just that almost, I'm not quite sure. And there's some validity to that, of course. No one wants to get duped into something that's false. But then again, when it's God who's calling you, like when it was with the disciples, come and be fishers of men, or whether, as we talked about last episode, Jesus just calling out to Peter on the boat, just come. That's all really we should need. We shouldn't need anything else to come and convince us.
That's right. So Agrippa needed a bit more persuasion, a bit more evidence.
But the thing was, I think Paul had given him all he needed.
I think so too.
Paul had given him a detailed testimony of his life and what God had done for him. And really, testimonies are one of the best evidences, if not the best evidence we can give for God and how God transforms and changes lives.
Well, you could argue then that it is a bit of a cop-out.
Yeah.
But it's just he's just saying that because he wants to delay it, he wants to put it off. He says, I don't. This isn't for me. I don't want to do it. At least not right now.
Yeah, it's not convenient for me to do it right now.
It's a dangerous way of thinking.
Yeah, especially when we don't know how long we have to live.
Yeah, definitely. That's right.
Awesome. And there are a few stories that weren't necessarily from the Bible, but some good stories from history about procrastination.
That's right. There were some really good real-life examples of procrastination and also of the negative effects of procrastination. And these are also from Steve Cable. There are a couple here. The first one, I'll give you all three. The first one is it was in the time of Napoleon, 1815. This is the scene. Napoleon's going to attack Wellington's British army at dawn, but instead of attacking at dawn, he puts it off. He delays his attack until 11 o'clock in the morning. That'll be, 5-6 hours that he's delayed the attack. And this delay actually allows the Prussians to arrive in time and attack the French flank, turning a certain French victory into a bitter defeat. So literally, in this example, procrastination is what caused Napoleon to meet his Waterloo. So that's the first example of how procrastination, it's not a good thing.
Nope.
Sometimes you get away with it. Most of the time, there's going to be some negative implications. The second one, on October 31, 1846, 30 years later, after a torturous shortcut gone bad cost them several weeks, the Donner Party decided to rest for a few days rather than press on over the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so putting this off, this delay for a few days, caused them to be trapped by a monster blizzard, which resulted in 36 people dying of starvation and the rest living out their lives with the stain of cannibalism.
I think that's a good one.
Massive.
They weren't procrastinating something that they knew was coming either.
No, they didn't know about it.
The blizzard wasn't an imminent threat, but that's sort of one of the reasons why you shouldn't procrastinate.
Yeah,
because you don't know what tomorrow brings.
Yes, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what's going to happen. I think Jai said before, you don't procrastinate an assignment because if you do it for long enough, you might get sick.
Yeah, and then...
Or you might have something else happen, and then if you've left it too late, you won't be able to finish it, or they might not give you an extension.
And I suppose when you think about it, if we're procrastinating it for something else, what are we filling out that other time with anyway? Especially when we're talking about spiritual things. What are we replacing that time with?
Well, obviously something that's a higher priority for us than the thing that we're supposed to be doing.
If we're doing it or putting it over our spiritual life with God. Yeah.
With God, yeah.
So it's very telling, isn't it?
Definitely. And then the final example I had here was the nation of Israel in the book of Exodus. Israel choosing to delay entering the promised land. So if you know the story, you've got the 12 spies that went into the promised land and they kind of scattered it out and they came back and 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, gave it a glowing report. And well, really, the 10 of them, at the beginning, they said, we're scared, there's giants in Canaan, there's giants in that land, we don't know, it's scary, it's unknown, we don't know how it's going to go. And they kind of, discouraged the Israelites from entering. The Israelites had come all this way to go into the promised land, and then from this recount, they decide that they're not going to go in, or at least they delay going in, they put it off. Despite Joshua and Caleb saying, we can do it because we've got God on our side, the rest of the nations say, well, we're not so sure. And the result of the procrastination, the result of delaying it and putting it off is, well, we all know they had to spend 40 years wandering around the wilderness.
It's a long walk.
It's a very long walk. And it cost a lot of them, or the older ones, it cost them everything because they didn't get to see it at all. Even Moses didn't get to see it, so...
Nice.
There are the 3 examples. I chose to take them out for time constraints mainly. I think they're really good, but I wanted to include biblical examples, and so I chose to prioritize those over these ones. I think these are really good. Obviously, especially that last one, which is a biblical example, but I chose to take them out because time didn't allow for them to be included.
Awesome. Well, that concludes the cutting room floor. Before we go on to our Christmas special extravaganza, Mr. Godfrey, do you have any recommended readings for us?
I sure do. Okay, I've got a book here. The book is called Eat That Frog. It's by Brian Tracy. It's not a book about procrastination in a spiritual sense. It's just procrastination in general. It's a really good book. And it talks about how to conquer procrastination, how to get into good routines, good habits, and to accomplish more in your day and in your life in general. The second reading I have, which is also a really, really good one, is the book Steps to Christ, and chapter 3. And I quoted this in the sermon. I recommend you read the whole chapter. It's about repentance, and it talks about how important it is to not delay or put off your repentance, not to put off your what's the word? Confession.
Aha.
Confession of...
We got there.
That's right, I had to think about it. Confession and repentance of sins.
Yeah.
And you'll have to go back to the sermon to listen to that quote, and I think I talk about it a little bit more there. I expand upon it a little bit. But I highly recommend both of those readings. I think they're really, really good if you're interested in procrastination. The second one, obviously, in a spiritual sense.
Alright, well, there we go. Now we can proceed on to the Christmas extravaganza.
Bonus round.
Bonus round. We thought we'd try and do something fun. Because it is Christmas, we want to do something interesting. And that's why I'm pitting Mr. Michael Godfrey and Mr. Jai up against each other in a Bible trivia. And the winner will receive the 10 M&Ms I have left in my bucket of Christmas M&Ms. Because I'm a generous guy. So, boys, I want this to be a clean game. No cheating.
Sure.
What are we going to use as our
buzzers?
Buzzers? Use your first name. So, Jai, you just go Jai. And Michael, to make yours more monosyllabic, just go Mike.
Mike?
Go with Mike.
Okay.
I'm just going to give mine a test run. Jai.
Oh, Mike. Yeah, they're working pretty good. Alright, good. Now, I reckon again, clean game, boys.
Yep.
None of this cheating business. We are a Christian show. So, alright. So it'll be the first one to get 5 points. They will get the M&Ms. Let's get ready to rumble. Question number 1. Who told Mary and Joseph to go to Bethlehem?
Mike. I think they had to go there because Augustus Caesar told them. He had the census.
Ooh, this boy is correct. Ding, 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 ding.
Nice.
I should have a better sound effect than my own voice going ding, ding for a correct answer. We might edit that, but who knows. Let's have a look at the next question. In the accounts announcing the birth of Christ, how many times did an angel or angels appear? And I will allow higher or lower for this one.
Birth of Christ.
Have a guess, just buzz in. Jai.
3.
I was going to guess 3.
Jai, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. You got it right! There we go, the scores are tied at 1-1. This is pretty good so far. Alright, next question. What are the meanings of the names Jesus and Emmanuel? Jai, go.
Jesus, God with us? Or is that...
Yeah, I'm gonna let you, because there are 2 components to this answer, I'm gonna let you try to do something with that. Jesus and Emmanuel.
So I would say it's God with us.
For both of them.
One of them.
I will give you 1 point for that there. You get 1 point. You can fact check this, guys, at home, but the trivia sources that we're using says that Jesus means Saviour. So Messiah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I will give you 1 point for getting Emmanuel. So it's 2-1 in Jai's favour. That's the way it's looking so far. Alright. This is an interesting one. If you've ever watched a Christmas movie, you've probably got the wrong impression, and you'll most likely get this question wrong. So,
yes.
How old was Jesus when the wise men found him?
Mike,
Michael, go.
was he 2 years old?
Was he 2 years old, he asks? Yes, he was. Ding, 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 ding.
Nice.
There we go.
It wasn't the night of the birth, was it?
No.
It was the shepherds.
That was the
I believe,
shepherds, it
not the
was.
wise men, because they would have had to take. They would have taken a long time to get there.
It took them quite a while. Alright, this is a one. Oh, the scores are 2-2. Just
Cool.
for the folks at home. 2-2.
Is this the decider?
No, it's just 5. Don't get too
Oh,
keen.
first 2-5. I thought it was best
You
of
thought you
5.
could taste those M&Ms. Not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
Alright. What are the 3 gifts which are mentioned being given by the wise men?
John, you all of them or
Yeah, all 3. I need them all.
frankincense, myrrh, and
5 seconds on the timer. 5,
oil?
1.
Mike,
Godfrey.
Gold.
Hey!
It's okay. You got 66% of the points.
And you get none of those. It goes to him.
Oh, what?
Well played, Mike.
It all goes
just,
to him.
just wait till the answers are all done and then chime in.
This is a very rigged game.
No, I have no bias in this,
Oh,
so
sure.
it's 3-2 in Godfrey's way.
Thanks for the points.
Alright. Which emperor ordered all the young children to be killed?
John,
Hey,
was it Herod?
I think you're onto it. Ding, ding, ding.
That's correct.
3-3.
Mm.
Alright. What animals does the Bible say were present at the birth of Jesus? Don't all chime in at once.
Mike,
Yes.
I believe it was a donkey. And, well, it would have been a donkey because they travelled on a donkey. Would it be,
Is donkey your final answer?
Oh, only one? Yes.
Trick question.
Oh, there were no animals present.
The
is
New
that
Testament gives no account of animals
Oh,
being
come
there.
on.
However,
There was a donkey
However, don't argue with me. You want a point or not? However, Isaiah 1:3 could be a prophecy talking about at least a donkey seeing the crib of his master God.
right? Really? Wow.
So, I'm going to give you a point because we'd assume that there might be a donkey or sheep there because they were shepherds.
True.
So, I'm going to give you the point. The scores are 4-3 for folks at home. This is match point, Godfrey's way. If he gets this, I'm afraid Jai's up the creek without a paddle. So,
And no M&Ms.
and no M&Ms
I'll share one with
to
you.
console him. 2 of the 4 Gospels do not mention the birth of Christ. Which 2?
John, Mark and Luke.
You are incorrect.
I think
I will not tell you which ones are correct or incorrect, for fairness.
we should split the points. Because
No.
I think it's Mark and John.
Godfrey is correct. I'm giving you all the points. You get a point and you get a point. Jai does not get a point.
Let's continue the game.
No, Jai gets no points. That is
Uh,
the score is now 5-3. Jai, that was an admirable effort, but these M&Ms were never meant for
Well
you.
done, well
okay,
done,
Nick.
Mikey.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
Good game.
Good, yeah. GG, well played. Awesome. All right. Well, that concludes our Christmas special of the After Sermon podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening in. Quickly before we go, Mr. Godfrey, where can these people find you?
Yes, so at the moment you can find me on YouTube. It's just Michael Godfrey. It's just my name. You should be able to find me.
Awesome.
I'll give you more details in the description.
Yep, there will be a link to his video, or you can check my subscriptions. I'll most likely be subscribed to him, so you'll be able to find him either way. And Mr. Watson, where can people find you?
Next year I'll probably have a YouTube channel up and running, but it'll probably be Jai Watson or something similar to that.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So put that in your calendar, guys. Something to look forward to. The Jai Watson channel. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed the episodes we've put out so far. We're going to be taking a break over the Christmas holidays. But once January comes back in, Watson will have a sermon, I'll have a sermon, and we're hoping to get back into this. We're hoping to improve it a bit as well. And yeah, thank you so much for listening in. And with that said, have a good one and
Good night.